Hi there, everyone. Doug Greenwald with the Convergent Technologies Advanced Solutions team, and welcome to our virtual panel on tools and technology for a safe school reopening. Many schools are open and as a result are already experiencing challenges as a result of the spread of COVID-19 early in the school year. During our 30 minutes together today, we'll be addressing everything schools need to consider that could aid in navigating this transition to the new normal. I am grateful to be joined by two experts in the education vertical, Dave Klug, Convergent SLED Strategic Business Development Manager. I'm also joined by Randy Welch, Avigilon's Director of Education Business Development. Now, before we address the topic at hand, I did want to share that you should visit convergent.com following this video, navigate to the newsroom, and sign up for the Convergent Insight Digital Summit 2020, an exclusive virtual trade show experience live from the comfort of your own office or home, to learn about the latest innovative strategies and tools to optimize business performance and create a safer work environment. Randy and Dave, thank you for being a part of this important panel today. Now, we'll certainly be spending some time talking about technology and policy, but I think it is vitally important for those watching to know right at the onset who are thinking to themselves, this is great. I want to hear about all the things my district probably can afford. Now, there are indeed significant funding programs specifically available for schools to pay for and deploy technology during this period of time to help meet physical safety and security requirements. So Dave, I'm going to start with you today because I really hope to give as much information to the people attending this about how schools can successfully fund initiatives they otherwise not normally be able to. Can you help educate viewers on the types of funding available right now?
Thanks, Doug. Happy to be here. Each year, the federal government makes investments in state and local government and education capabilities to help meet physical safety and security requirements. Some grants are in response to a major event like COVID-19, and the CARES Act is making funds available to governors, state education agencies, and higher education to help prevent, prepare for, and respond to the devastating effects of COVID-19. CARES Act funding is ongoing, and all individual US states manage the flow of information and funds from the federal government to state, local, and municipal agencies and education institutions. Other federal grant programs for security recur annually, such as those from the Departments of Justice and Homeland Security, for example. The Federal Emergency Management Agency is among the largest grant providers. State and local governments are also sources of funding with tax and bond programs.
Perfect. So is there any type of idea of how much money is available to schools as of today?
Overall, and from the federal government, funding for physical security and safety equipment, detection and enhancement, crime prevention and information technology equipment runs in the billions of dollars each year. With respect to the CARES Act, just to give you an idea, for education alone, and this includes K through 12 and higher education, there's about $30 billion in available funding that came from the first round of CARES Act funding. In a normal year, that without COVID, funds are flowing down from numerous federal agencies throughout a given year, and there are numerous grant programs from each agency. Again, agencies like the Departments of Homeland Security and Justice. Timetables vary, but many of the grant programs that our customers are interested in have applications due in the springtime and with award announcements made in the fall of each year.
Interesting. So is there any guidelines with regards to how these grant funds can specifically be used? Is there any flexibility regarding those spending guidelines? And I guess, are the grant programs competitive? How does somebody get their hands on this money?
Thanks, Doug. We get questions, these very questions, all the time from customers. Many of the federal programs that I've discussed thus far, particularly those that recur year in, year out, are competitive grants that follow strict application guidelines. For something like the CARES Act funding for COVID, states governors have asked for maximum flexibility in how to spend the funds, and they support a broad range of uses. Convergent offers technology like that from Avigilon, and services that meet certain guidelines. Things like contactless access control, video analytics for social distancing and occupancy detection, thermal imaging technology, and Convergent's own coronavirus exposure reporting tool. And we offer guidance and thought leadership with respect to the different types of federal, state, and local funding programs.
Perfect. So I assume once somebody's kind of understood what they need to bring into their school, how might they go about purchasing Convergent solutions and services through these programs?
Convergent and our customers leverage numerous state and local contracts, as well as cooperative purchasing vehicles like Sourcewell, Omnia Partners, and the National Cooperative Purchasing Alliance. These types of pre-competed programs represent pre-negotiated goods and services that allow customers to have confidence in receiving solutions designed for their specific needs, in having a trusted partner, and with competitive pricing to meet customers' budgets. Convergent is uniquely positioned to support our customers with security technology relationships that are at the cutting edge, to promote cost-effective solutions for our customers and to ensure high-quality after-sales service.
Excellent, Dave. Really great info. It's good to know that there's not only money available out there, but there's some pretty easy ways that should be already within the contract vehicle of most school districts to be able to obtain both product and services. And so if you're watching this and you'd like help in navigating the contract purchasing experience or process, certainly click below within the Convergent contact form, and we can get Dave in touch with you to help you out with that process. So great to know that there's a variety of avenues for funding available for schools. Now, Randy, over to you. So I'd love for you to just take a moment, maybe talk about the policies schools are putting in place that are really assisting them with safe reopenings.
Sure. Thanks, Doug. And Dave, that was great. Back when I was running schools, I needed someone like you on the team to help me know how to get money. So let me start first with two great sources for people to look at. One is the actual CDC website itself, and an article called "The Importance of Reopening Schools." Talks about the social emotional need for students to open, to be back in school. It's just an excellent source. And the other is Education Week puts out a map showing you state by state what schools are open, or what the state policy is, and they update that every single week. It's a fascinating piece of data, and it's a wonderful thing to look into to get an idea of what's going on around the country. So I am the director of a team at Avigilon of 10 business development managers, all in education. And we look at this on a constant basis. What are schools looking at? What policies are in place? What are they doing in order to open schools? First thing is, most of the schools in this country right now do tend to be opened, and that magical word we've all heard of, hybrid, which essentially means kids are going for 2 days and then 3 days off. So half the school goes Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday's everyone's online day, and then Thursday, Friday, the other half the school goes. Now, when they're in school, though, the policies that are in place really do restrict movement, and they restrict or make some restrictions on what can actually happen in the school. And the first thing that we've noticed is face masks, right? Most schools have a policy that students, when they are passing from class to class, must wear face masks. When they enter the school, when they exit the school, they wear face masks. Very few schools are actually wearing face masks in the classroom, which, as a father of a 10-year-old, I'm very happy to see. The next piece is social distancing, right? We've all heard that magical 6 feet. That is something that a lot of schools are adhering to in terms of, again, when kids are passing in the hallway, when they're going from one place to the other, when they're entering schools, that type of thing. Also, when cafeterias are open, in cafeterias, in gymnasiums, that type of thing. Classrooms tend to be, because only half the students tend to be there, it's easier to do the 6 feet social distancing, but I think there's less of a focus on it within the actual classroom itself. The next piece, and this ties into that hybrid, is occupancy. is understanding the number of people that can be in a particular building or in a particular room within the school. For instance, a gymnasium or a cafeteria or a library. A lot of schools are restricting the number of people who can be in that particular spot. Also, due to some state rules, there's a number of people who are allowed in the school as a whole. And then thermal technology. Now, thermal technology is an interesting piece because it goes all over the place. Many schools do have policies of making sure that all students are tested for a temperature before they enter the school. That can go from, I just spoke to a very good friend of mine who's a superintendent, and they actually have monitors who are out as students are getting out of their parents' cars or they're getting out of the bus. They're checking their temperatures right there. Other schools have kiosks. As people are walking in, they're checking their temperatures. Others only do that for visitors. It's all over the place. And then lastly, visitors. Now, this is an interesting thing that we originally didn't think of as something that we'd have to track, but it's really become an important thing in schools in terms of some schools simply say no visitors, no vendors, no one's allowed in the building when students are there. Others have very strict policies. You have to wear a mask. You've got to make sure that we've checked your temperature before we walked in. And we found that some of the technologies that we've developed have really helped schools move in that direction.
Yeah, it always seems like policy is a strong catalyst for the technology that comes out next. I mean, just recently, right, California signed into law any business that identifies somebody as COVID positive has 24 hours to notify anybody else that may have been in proximity, which is going to lend itself to requiring some automation and some processes in place so that that very manual process is not as burdensome as it probably will be for organizations that have to meet those requirements. So for you, Randy, what tech are you seeing asked for most by the schools?
Yeah, great question. Let me share my screen. One of the things that we've really looked at and what's our kind of goal and how we put things together is that not only is it important for us to make schools safe, but it's also important for us to set it up so that administrators can make good data-driven decisions in the policies that they put in place. I think sometimes it's easy to get caught into detection and forget about the part of we need to make sure that the policies we put in place are working. So with that in mind, the four main things we're going to talk about today, and they're based on what we had just shared earlier in terms of the policies that schools are putting in place, are our occupancy counting technology, our social distancing technology, our no face mask detection, and our thermal detection camera. And right from the start, if we go back to the concerns of how things are paid for and the additional costs that may be in place, right from the start, I want to say that these first three are part of our ACC 7. So it's not an additional cost if a district is already using Avigilon and has already upgraded to our most recent version of our VMS. So let's start with occupancy counting. Now, very simply put, occupancy counting is just what it says. Our cameras using analytics that we already have in place in terms of line crossing can already count the number of people going in or out of a particular location. Now, this can be school. So you could have cameras on multiple doors that will count the number of students and or adults entering the building and leaving the building. And those can all go together to be able to, so you always know at any given time the number of people in a building. That is one piece. You can also use it, and I think this is where we're beginning to see some places use it in terms of the number of people allowed in a larger area. So your gymnasiums, your libraries, your cafeterias. And there are two different ways of looking at the data in this. And the first is an entry control screen. So quite literally, it's putting a iPad or some sort of screen at a door that'll allow people to see the number of people in that particular space and gives them a kind of stop and go. Can they come in? Can they go in? And once we hit the total occupancy, obviously that turns red and people are not allowed to go in beyond that. The other piece to it is our cloud-based dashboard. Now, what that allows us to do is it allows an administrator to look over through a particular day and see when are the points of highest occupancy throughout the day. When are the points of highest occupancy in one particular building? That data then allows that administrator to make policies of who can be where and when based on actual data and not based on speculation. So we'll move to our next, and that is social distancing. Now, social distancing is difficult. We all know that. We've all been out. We understand what that can look like. Within our technology, we have the ability, using our H5A cameras, to literally measure the distance between two people or between multiple people, okay? And what that allows us to do is at any given point to know whether or not particular social distancing policies are being adhered to. So for instance, you could have a camera in a hallway, and that camera could be looking at a line of students coming through, and it measures the distance between those particular students. And given that we know that social distancing is something very big within hallways and in larger areas, that's important for an administrator to know. And again, when we look back at that making data-driven decisions, what the social distancing analytic allows us to do is to go at the end of the day and look through and say, okay, how do we do? How do we do as a school, as students are passing from class to class? Or, you know, a perfect example, I talked to my local principal about this recently, is the out in the playground. Students are out in a playground, they still want them to be social distance. I think, you know, realistically, that probably doesn't happen nearly as much as we want, but it does allow for the administrator to look at that time period, see how many breaches of protocol there had been, and then put in a policy in place. Maybe they need more aides out there. Maybe they need more adults to supervise, or maybe they need to have less students out in the playground or spread them further. But either way, this allows them to have that ability to search through the day and figure out what was going on. We also have the ability there to do an event search. So you can look and say, okay, there was a breach here in, you know, hallway A. Let's go back and look at that video and see what the situation was. All right, let's move on to the next. Actually, I wanted to show this first. This gives an idea of what that dashboard looks like. In the bottom right-hand corner is a screenshot of a particular dashboard throughout a day, giving you the number of social distance violations. Not a big fan of the word, but the number of times that that particular policy had been breached. And this is all cloud-based. So this allows an administrator to be able to look at the data. And the great thing from a security standpoint is you can give people access to the data without giving them access to the actual video itself. And that means a lot in terms of schools, in terms of liability, and in terms of who can have access to video. Okay, let's move on to the next piece. No face mask detection. I'm sure I'm going to call it face mask detection. It's something I make that mistake often, but in fact, it is no face mask detection. And our AI-powered analytics can recognize whether or not a person is wearing a mask, and all sorts of masks. So it's not just one particular type of mask, a bandana over their face, basically anything that's used to cover the nose and the mouth, our AI analytics can differentiate, okay? Now, obviously, this is important on many different levels, right? And we go back to the data piece. It does allow for a administrator to go through and say how many breaches of our face mask policy have we seen through a day. Same thing if we go back to the example of the hallway, right? A lot of students are supposed to wear, most students are have to wear a face mask as they're passing from class to class. This would be able to go and see how adherence to that policy goes, right? And then the same things, we can look at the day, see where there have been breaches, again, maybe in the gymnasium, maybe out on in a playground, we see more breaches, but then that allows them to make decisions based on those particular data. Where this this detection technology is slightly different than our others is that you can get real-time alerts. So, for instance, if you have a vendor in the building where vendors are allowed, or a visitor in the building, doing whatever it happens to be that they need to do in the building, and a camera catches that they're not wearing a face mask, then at that moment we can set an alert, and that alert can then notify an administrator to go and remediate the issue. Ask the person to put on their face mask, or if they don't have one, ask them to leave the building. You really wouldn't want real-time alerts for social distancing and some of those other things, because I'm sure the breaches are going to be very high in number. But with face mask detection, it's far more important that they're able to see that. And then we're going to move on to the last piece of technology we're going to talk about today, and that is thermal detection. Now, this is different than the other ones, where the other ones are add-on analytics to ACC7, or actually, let me rephrase that. They are analytics built into ACC7. Our thermal detection is a separate product. It is a specialized camera calibrated to be able to measure temperature. And I recently had a chance to use this at our office in Somerville, Massachusetts. I've got to say, it's very slick. It's a very slick tool. And how this is set up is it is set up to a person steps in front of the camera, and then behind them, they have what's called a black body device. And if you look at this picture, you have a little gray square here, and that is the black body device. Now, the black body device is incredibly important for precision in terms of temperature. So that black body device is set to a particular temperature, and that is what the camera compares to. So it takes a picture of the person. It knows that body device, the black body device behind it, is set to a particular temperature, and it compares that. And if you look at some of the third-party testing that we've had, our thermal detection is very, very precise. And that's important for people to be able to have that. Now, the important piece here also is that thermal detection cameras are not meant to be the end-all be-all in terms of whether someone can come into your building or not. It's really meant to give that first signal to say, now that person needs to be further screened. So if we see a heightened temperature, then we say, okay, that person needs to go to the school nurse or another person who has a thermometer right there to be able to take that temperature. A little bit about this too is it's also looking at the inner eye area, which really is the best area to get a person's true temperature. It's less apt to be elevated due to heated skin from sitting outside in the heat and that type of thing. Use case scenario for this is really interesting. And one of the uses I recently talked to a superintendent about is particularly for their vendors or visitors, is to have this little sort of kiosk set up at the main entry set up so you could have someone at the camera very far away, so well over 6 feet away. Person comes in, they stand in front of the camera, it checks for their elevated temperature, and then if they're fine, then they can go into the building or come into the office and do what they need to do. Or if it looks like it's elevated, then they can send the school nurse out to check that temperature, or simply not allow that person into the building. So that's it, Doug. I think that covers all of the technologies that we've put in place to try to meet those policies that schools have in place, so that we can make schools safer places and allow administrators to make better data-driven decisions.
Yeah, great in-depth insights to all of that. And obviously you were talking a little bit about the thermal camera there and the requirement for the black body. It not only makes the camera more accurate, but it also ensures that a Avigilon aligns with the FDA guidelines that were set forth in April of 2020 with regards to non-FDA approved devices being used specifically for this use case. The fact that you guys have come to market with an accurate camera that also aligns with those guidelines is incredibly important for anybody deploying something that's going to perform this function. As far as the systems in place currently, do you have to be an Avigilon customer to take advantage of any one of these analytic overlays? Or can you have any system in place and there's a connection that can be made there?
Really, when we're talking about the analytics, we're looking at the face mask detection and social distancing and all of that stuff. You really do need to be an ACC customer, meaning you have to have our VMS. Now, that said, many of the technologies can work with third-party cameras if you use our AI appliance, which allows us to put our analytics on a third-party camera.
Perfect. So you don't necessarily have to overhaul your existing system if you're not an Avigilon customer.
True. Now, of course, we would always want that, but no, we're able to make some of these things work. Now, for existing Avigilon customers, if someone is at ACC 6, then we would need them to upgrade to ACC 7 in order for these all to work.
Perfect. And I would assume that, from I'll call these COVID technologies, analytics, right? They need to be monitored in real time. I know you showed kind of the dashboard and the ability to receive alerts and all of that, but I guess talk through a little bit of the operational side of it. How are people using this technology? How are they being notified? And how are they then taking action on what they've been seeing?
Yeah, great question. And what I love about the technology when we first introduced them is that you don't need someone constantly monitoring. And quite frankly, they're not designed for that. When you look at your social distancing is really meant to give data so that someone can make a data-driven decision based on policy and all that later on. Same thing with occupancy counting, although occupancy counting is a mix, right? Is you can look at the data to see what went through the day, but also because you have that monitor, or you can have that monitor right outside a door, it allows you to do real time, so you know exactly how many people are in either the building or in that particular space. And then the face mask detection, that it really depends on the use case, right? It depends on what the administrator wants to do. In terms of, yes, you can have a screen up, so every time it sees someone without a face mask, it gives an alert, but you don't necessarily need to do that. It's more designed so that you have those data so that you can make decisions based on what happens over a particular time period.
Perfect. So knowing we kind of have a path for school districts to get funding, can you walk through, and obviously every environment's going to be different. There's going to be different camera counts, different requirements for entry exits. But what are some anticipated costs typically related to deploying some of what you guys are bringing to market as far as solutions that schools could buy into, find funding for, and deploy in a relatively short period of time?
Right. Yeah. And that's always, it's one of those questions that's always very difficult to answer because it depends on what's already in place. For an Avigilon customer who, let's say, has ACC 6 in place, then the one cost that they would need for that is to update to ACC 7 in order to take advantage of all of the built-in analytics. In some cases, for instance, social distancing, if you want to use social distancing, you do need our H5 cameras, which people have already begun to deploy. So there may be a particular cost there. And as I said before, if you have third-party cameras and want to use these analytics with ACC 7, then you would, for some of them, need our AI appliance in order to be able to make those work. And then, of course, the thermal camera is, because it's a specialized camera, there is a cost for that particular product.
Yeah, absolutely. So something we can certainly walk through with anyone that's interested in going deeper on that. Well, Randy, thank you very much for walking through how Avigilon is attacking the market and trying to support schools returning safely back to elementaries, middle schools, high schools, you name it, right? We want to make sure our students are back learning, engaging, and continue to move forward in their education. And Dave, thank you very much for walking us through some of the funding options as well today. For those watching, I truly hope this gave you some additional support, not just to how to find funding, but also what to consider in terms of furthering your safety initiatives. If you'd like to understand how to get in touch with myself or someone that was on the panel today, and we can specifically walk through your requirements, go ahead and click on the Contact Us button here within the Convergent webpage. Until next time, stay safe. Thank you for doing your part to help bring students and staff back to the schools safely and responsibly. Take care.